Hi guys, welcome back to ChessTrainer. Today we're talking about visualization, and I'll give you several exercises to train your visualization skills, obviously blindfolded. I'll revisit one of my old videos and give you new exercises to try. But first, let's explain what visualization is. Well, visualization is the ability to see the moves before making them, kind of like, imagine the Queen's Gambit. I'm sure you've all seen the series. Like when the main character watched the pieces move on the ceiling. Well, that's more or less what happens in our minds because obviously during chess tournaments we can't move the pieces, so we have to imagine the pieces moving on the board in order to better calculate variations and our possibilities. Well, visualization is exactly this skill, and let's say the stronger our visualization is, the better we will be at analyzing and making these evaluations. And what better way to train it than with blindfold exercises? Today I will suggest 5 of them. And I'm presenting them in order of difficulty. So if the first one seems too easy, go straight to the second, or even the third. So here's the first exercise. It might seem really trivial, but it's not at all guessing the color of the squares. So this exercise is done in pairs. So one, let's say our partner will name a square and we will say, respond with the color of that square. It might seem trivial to you, but actually my idea for this exercise is to do a sort of speed run. So you have 60 seconds, and in those 60 seconds, you have to guess as many squares as possible, as many colors as possible. And of course, if you're paired up with another chess player, you can make it a bit of a competition, have them do it too, and take turns. It might seem easy, but actually the speed of this game helps us visualize better. So what do we need to do? We need to close our eyes, try as much as possible to visualize the chessboard with all its squares and guess the color of a square. So G4 is white, C7 is black, C8 is white, K8 is black, D1 is white. You need to do it at this speed, and above all guys, one very important thing. I attended some instructor courses where I learned something shocking. There is a trick based on the letters and numbers that allows you to know whether a square is white or black. Please, I won't even tell you this trick. Please don't use tricks because visualization really needs to be visualization. So you need to visualize a board. If G8 is white, you should know it without using any tricks. And if K1 is black, you should know it without using any tricks. By doing this, you'll have a clearer vision of the chessboard, and you'll also be able to state the moves correctly without making mistakes, right? You'll be able to visualize the squares better as well. So try to do this little game in speedrun mode, try to beat your partner, try to beat your own records as well. Count how many squares you guess correctly in 60 seconds, and then try to improve and do better each time. Let's move on to the second exercise. Let's say from the second to the fifth exercise, they're all very similar. It's just that the level of difficulty increases. This exercise is called the knight's path. So we have a knight, of course we're still blindfolded, and our sparring partner tells us, your knight is on H1, okay? So our partner can choose any square on the chessboard. And they can say, okay, with this knight on H1, you have to reach G8. What we have to do is simply find any path that gets us to G8. So any path is fine. Just choose the one you like best. Here, it's not really an exercise about getting to G8 as quickly as possible, but rather the exercise is to reach G8 by passing through the correct squares. So from H1, I can go either to F2 or G3. I can't go directly to G4, G5 or G6. So you also need to be precise with the naming of the squares. Obviously this exercise is very, very simple, but it's really the foundation for you to start gaining some confidence playing blindfolded. Let me remind you, blindfold over your eyes. It's not allowed to look at a chessboard. Even if it's empty, that doesn't count. You have to be completely blind. You must not look at anything at all that could help you. The third exercise, still on the knight's path, gets a bit more complicated. In fact, the basic exercise will always remain the same. The knight has to go from one square to a final square. But this time, our opponent has a queen. Our opponent doesn't move, so we always make the move with the knight. But let's suppose I have the knight on H1 and the queen is placed on A5. So the exercise requires us to bring the knight, let's say for example to G8 again, but we have to do it without passing through the squares controlled by the opponent's queen. This makes it a bit more difficult because not only do we have to think about the knight's path, but at the same time we also have to consider which squares are, let's say, mined, and therefore which path allows me to avoid leaving the knight en prise. So this is the third exercise. The fourth exercise is quite similar, but we add an extra level of difficulty. In addition to the queen, a rook is also added. We still have the knight, so as before, our partner chooses a square for the knight. So the knight starts from a1. Black has the rooks, with a rook on a6 and the queen on e5. We need to reach the g8 square, and once again, we have to find a path for the knight that allows us to reach g8 without ending up, let's say, on any squares controlled by the rook and the queen. The last exercise might seem similar to these, but I can assure you it's the most difficult of all, because once again, the knight's path is the exercise. So we have a knight, and we need to move it from one square to another, but this time our opponent has a queen and two knights. Be careful, this exercise is really difficult, guys. It may seem like the two knights control fewer squares compared to a rook, which controls the whole board. However, unlike the rook or the queen, whose control is linear, knights control squares by jumping, and I can assure you that, in terms of visualization, this is not at all simple. This exercise is really difficult because you have to pay attention, first of all, to your knight's path, but then you also can't move through any squares controlled by the opponent's queen, and you can't move through any squares controlled by the opponent's knights. I can assure you that, at first, you won't be able to clearly visualize the squares controlled by the opponent's knights, so this is really difficult. If you manage to do all these exercises correctly, and of course repeat them over time, you have definitely already reached a good level of visualization. If you can't complete one, generally what you should do is repeat the easier exercise many times. A small note, you cannot capture pieces, so our knight's path must follow a route where there are no squares controlled by the opponent's pieces, and I also can't go to squares where an opponent's piece is located. So with these exercises, in my opinion, you can start to build a foundation for practicing blindfold chess problems. Naturally, our goal is then to solve real tactical exercises, perhaps blindfolded, where all the pieces are on the board. But obviously that's something much more difficult because there are so many pieces to visualize. So let's start with these exercises. Let me know in the comments how you get on. I'm especially curious to hear if you also found the last exercise difficult. With those knights controlling some unusual squares, it can be tricky at times. So that's all for today. I hope you'll practice a lot with these exercises, and I'll see you in the next videos.